Hey, this is Michael Emery. Thanks for tuning into the Slow Baja. This podcast is powered by Tequila Fortaleza, handmade in small batches, and hands down, my favorite tequila. Hey, I want to tell you about your new must-have accessory for your next Baja trip. Benchmark Maps has released a beautiful, beautiful Baja California Road and Recreation Atlas. It's a 72-page large format book of detailed maps and recreation guides that makes the perfect planning tool for exploring Baja. Pick yours up at benchmarkmaps.com.
Okay. Everything sound good? You want to close a sliding glass door there? We'll keep out in case any UPS trucks come or anything like that. And we are recording.
Well, you know, it's interesting to me that people have responded so well to locations that I've recorded and have just been awful.
Yes.
That Harker Surf Shop.
I gotcha. We're gonna touch on that.
Miguel Angel de la Cueva.
Yes.
Hello, happy birthday to you, Miguel Angel de la Cueva. It's your birthday
All right.
today, Cinco de Mayo.
Who's driving this thing?
You are.
Okay. Greetings, Slow Baja listeners. Do not touch that dial. My name is Christopher Keiser. I am the editor of the Slow Baja podcast. And worry not, the great Michael Emery is sitting here next to me, putting down his Cafe Corretto with a little tequila fortaleza put in a cappuccino.
So nice to start the morning with that.
It's, believe it or not, it's been 1 year now since the Slow Baja podcast came under the steerage of Michael Emery. And I suggested to Michael that it might be interesting to do a little year in review and talk to him about his experiences recording all the fabulous guests in wondrous locations and share that with you, the listeners. So good morning, Michael. How you doing?
Hey, you know, it's funny for me to be on this side of the thing. Honestly, we had not set out to do this today, and so I'm very, very excited that this opportunity has come my way, and that you're going to be asking me a bunch of questions, just like I ask people. So let her rip, baby. Thank you for the coffee. Thank you for the spot of Fortaleza to get my throat in the proper mode here. It's still morning hours in California, so it's a nice way to start the day.
Yes, this morning brought to you by Tequila Fortaleza, Breakfast of Champions.
Añejo solves everything.
Yes, well, it gives you those dulcet tones that I mentioned earlier. But let's get right to it. This is a little bit of navel gazing, but again, for me, I find it so interesting because when you first mentioned the podcast, and in full disclosure, you and I have been friends for a couple decades now. Our wives work together. And you mentioned this podcast. I'm like, oh, gosh, another guy doing a podcast and really what's going to be in Slow Baja.
Another crummy podcast.
I'm all ready to fall asleep. And that, despite the fact I've always been charmed by Baja, but it's still sort of like a black box mystery to me. There might as well be there be dragons on it. And listening to your podcast, I think you encounter a lot of the same thing, right? Tell me about demystifying Baja for people.
Well, Baja for me came easily because I went to college in San Diego. So I didn't put any thought to it. It's like people who went to college in upstate New York probably just went to Canada because it was cheaper and the beer was available to you when you were 18. That's really why I went to Baja first. And it is just that. We went, we drank, we were dumb. I was enamored by the tacos and the drinking for sure, but I don't feel like I really got to know the place for a long, long time. I probably went there for 25 years without really getting to know the place. So for me, that getting to know Baja came along more so. And, I was there on an extended trip in 2001 with my family, but then more so when I got the 1971 FJ 40 Land Cruiser in 2012 after I sold my old Datsun race car. And I needed to plow that money rapidly into something besides a backyard remodel, and got on Craigslist and found an old Land Cruiser and bought it. And then really within a couple months had it kitted out and was ready to go to Baja in it, and had a great first real trip of traversing the entire peninsula on dirt. Like, how many gallons of gas do I have with me? How many miles are we going? I only get 10 miles to the gallon. Doing some math, looking at the Baja Almanac and saying, son of a gun, this is a long ways and there's nothing out here if we break down. So are we ready for this? So it was the first time that I really got off road and went, oh, this is why people come to Baja.
That's amazing to me. I've got raised eyebrows, even though I know this story and I know some of the ventures you took before on a Dakar motorcycle and such, and still that impresses me that you would jump in that old cruiser. And it's a fine cruiser, don't get me wrong. And I've had lots of stupid adventures in cruisers in my past, but just to have the courage to go south of the border, it must have really been a siren song for you to want to venture forth in that. And who was your partner? You said we.
Yeah, so I've had a good buddy since college. I knew him growing up, but he was a few years older than me, so he was the cool old kid when I was, he was driving a Camaro at 16 when I was 12 and looking up to him like, ooh, that's my friend's older sister's boyfriend, Ted, and he's cool. So then he took a more circuitous route to college, and so we ended up at college together at the same time, and he just had a great sense of adventure for Baja and was the first one to have a Land Cruiser. We used to drive his old, really run-down old Land Cruiser to Baja. He was 20-something years old when he got it and had lived a hard life, but it was just such a great primitive vehicle that whenever we were in that thing, it's like you're transported back in time. So it was like a double whammy. Baja, I believe, transports you back in time, and then to drive such a simple, maybe primitive vehicle as an old Land Cruiser that's open to the elements, no doors, all that stuff. It just you have to feel every mile. So my buddy Ted Donovan and I have since 1984 when we took our first trip together, and then multiple trips through Baja as college kids and after. And then really we sort of cemented a deep friendship and love for Mexico in 2006 when we raced the La Carrera Panamericana together, which is a 2,000-mile long high-speed vintage car race, and we had the least amount of horsepower and the least amount of experience, and we finished dead last, but we had the time of our lives. And that's when, on one horrible hard day when our water pump dumped and we were waiting for a tow, I said to Ted, if we ever figure this thing out, if we ever figure this race out, we need to get into a Class 11 Beetle and do the Baja 1000.
How many people have watched on the Baja 1000? What's Dust to Glory?
Dust to Glory,
and thought,
exactly.
Class 11, man. That's where.
Hey, if anybody out there has a Class 11, I'm going to bring a sponsor, and I'm ready to go. Baja 1000, Nora 1000. I want to get in George Plimpton style. Get in the navigator's seat, and let's go. Class 11s. If you won't kill me, let's do it.
And if there's two of you and you have a Class 11, I want to go do it Hunter S. Thompson style. You can be the attorney, I'll be Hunter S. or vice versa. Either way, I would love to go. My first 4 vehicles were air-cooled Volkswagens.
There you go.
Doesn't mean to say that I'm handy with them. I just know how to replace an accelerator cable.
So I think already I was off on a tangent, not answering the question that you asked me, if I can even remember the
about
question.
Demystifying Baja for people?
Something like that.
Yeah, no, yeah. I'm sure you still come up against it. And for me, living here in Northern California, which is essentially Northern Baja, which I know is, antithetical, Baja being lower and northern. But it's kind of embarrassing to me that I don't know Baja better. That it's like not knowing Oregon or something like that. It really should be something that we have a closer connection with, and yet it really is. Here there be dragons. Getting across the border. It sounds intimidating and scary, and I hear you and your guests repeatedly saying, "It's the friendliest people you'll ever meet. I've had more gracious help, meals, electricity, roadside mechanics, stuff like that."
Yeah, no, it really is that. And there are some barriers. You do have to cross a border, international border, which normally it's, you drive up to the border, there's a green light, you keep on driving. And nowadays you stop, I don't know, as soon as you can find a parking spot 100 yards past the border someplace and walk back and get your FMM, which is a document that you're supposed to have, especially if you're driving a vehicle and you have Baja-bound insurance. Your Baja-bound insurance or other insurance is only valid if you have an FMM. So you're going to want to stop and get that. But once you've done that, and some people are savvy enough to do it online, Slow Baja is very analog, so I do it in person, hand out a few stickers, say hello to people. And once you get that sticker, once you get that document, you are free to travel in country legally for up to 6 months. So, it's after that, it's just where are you going next? So, I mean, Tecate, we're starting at Tacos La Huerita for 3 or 4 tacos, and then it's on to the Valle and Ensenada, or, down Rumoroso and heading over to San Felipe, or, it's a lot easier than you think. And it isn't really that challenging with a good map, or downloading, a Google map to your phone, or, people seem to use GPS now. I see these screens. I don't know what they are. I still use my old Baja Almanac, and I'm really looking forward to getting that first benchmark, recreation atlas for Baja that's coming out here. I haven't seen it yet, but I've seen it on the internet, and it looks like it's really, really well done. So I'm looking forward to having that in my hand. But I love looking at a map, seeing the squiggly line, and saying, let's try that road.
It's true romance of travel, along with the open air vehicle and paper maps, and it's a different skill dealing with maps, but one that I think is especially important when you're out there in long periods of time. Imagine you don't have a phone signal at all, or it can be kind of sketchy. So we could talk about the practicalities and how-to guides of driving down to Baja all day long. Maybe we put a pin in that and we come back for another episode, and I can ask you before I drive my
how to a slow Baja.
Yeah, and how not to.
How to Baja.
You have a lot of those. The cast of characters. I will freely admit, again, this is a lot of confessional for me, but as the editor, I'm obliged to listen to these hour-long podcasts all the way through several times. And a lot of the characters you've described to me are like, oh my gosh, really? Some old lady who does burro packing, like, how interesting can it be? I was rapt.
Pretty much life or death.
Pretty
amazing.
The most amazing characters and hardcore, rugged individuals you've met down there. Tell me about some of the more enlightening experiences you've had with your guests.
So going back to getting this thing going, I was searching for, I hadn't really listened to podcasts. I'm devoted a listener of radio, and hadn't really found my way with podcasts yet. And once I got on iTunes and went, oh, wow, there's like 1,888,000, I guess, I think, when I started. And I thought, I wonder if there's anything on Baja. So I just did a Baja search, found Jim Riley's show, tuned into a couple episodes. That's cool. Pretty off-road centric. Enjoyed it, and started thinking like people who I wanted to hear from, and started thinking about, I'd love to get Sarah Beck just talking about her, I don't know, 200, 300, 500 Baja trips that she's taken. Pete Springer, who I befriended from my first Baja XL trip down there, just reached out to him. He was the navigator and the builder of the first FJ40 that won the Baja 1000. I just reached out to him on the internet and just asked, like, what should I do? What shouldn't I do?
And you recorded with Pete in the cab of his pickup truck, right?
the cab of my truck. We met at a bar near his house, and it was really noisy. And so we went to the liquor store next door and got a couple of cans in paper bags, and actually sat in my 4Runner. I think Pete sat in the back seat because it was early in COVID. We really didn't know what the whole COVID deal was, so we got in a closed car. We got in a closed car with the windows up, with a 79-year-old guy drinking tall boys out of paper cans.
This is completely
paper
destroying
bags.
People's image
of
the
we just
Slow
needed
Baja
the quiet
headquarters and sound studios.
We just needed some quiet. But he, my background is a photographer, and I like to see people. I like them in front of me. So the approach that I took to this podcast was as a photographer, that I wanted to be where the guests were, talking to them, looking into their eyes, and Pete was just such a great, Sarah was my first guest, but Pete was just such a great spirit. He was the first podcast that I posted, and I posted it on Jim Riley's show. I guest hosted 4 shows for Jim, and it was just such a wonderful experience that it made me say, I really want to do this. I really want to do this myself. And so, with just blind ignorance, I launched and started contacting people and saying, hey, I'd like to sit down with you and talk to you about Baja. And only got big leagued once, so that was great. That person will always remain, maybe twice. We're not going to go into it, but most people were very generous with their time and getting to sit down with me safely with microphones at distance during COVID pandemic was, I think, a tall order. So did a few by Zoom, but it was really great, again, to sit down with people and hear about their firsthand experiences and bring them to the Slow Baja community.
Well, you say you got big leagued a couple times, but yet you have had some genuine legends on the show. One of them, I think I suggested, and you're like, oh, I didn't think about that. Speaking of Dust to Glory, or On Any Given Sunday.
Yeah, Malcolm Smith. So there are so few people who have achieved a level of fame that they're one-word names. I don't know if anybody Pele or Michael or Madonna or whatever, but Malcolm means a lot to a lot of people, and reached out to his son Alexander, who was very generous, and it was 15, 20 messages back and forth by the time we finally got to our meeting. But Malcolm couldn't have been better. He met me at his house in Riverside. I sat down with him in his living room. We had long mic cords, and he's a guy who has done an awful lot and has achieved an immense amount of success in his field. And he just couldn't have been nicer to a nobody like me. So it was very gratifying.
It was very satisfying for me to edit it. I couldn't finish the edit fast enough to turn on Any Given Sunday and watch his. I mean, he's a virtuoso on a motorcycle.
Yeah, and he uses a walker now. He's got some health issues, and he has not a steep driveway, but an uphill driveway. And he wanted to take me out back and show me a couple of Land Rovers that were hanging around his backyard. He kicked my ass going up that driveway. I mean, he's an 80-year-old dude on with a walker, and he's like, whoa. I mean, I live in San Francisco and walk hills every day, and that guy, he still moves pretty well.
Yeah. And
he's got a real glint in his eye. And that's, to me, that's why I don't want to do these things on Zoom if I can avoid it. Like if I can see that the person, to get the essence of somebody in person, I think is really amazing. And, again, Malcolm's spirit, that glint in his eye, he even at his advanced age in the situation he's in, you can see, if you've watched on any Sunday, you can see that guy right there in front of you. So that's why I want to do this.
Yeah. Well, also kudos to you for not dismissing him at his, advanced age and his difficulties, and thank you for capturing him, because that was, for me, as a listener, that was one of the key moments of this past year. Moving on to some of the others, I
just want to interrupt you though. Let me just dive right in. But Malcolm is a virtuoso. But you kind of touched on it earlier. Eve Ewing.
Yeah.
I mean, what an amazing woman.
Crazy. I shouldn't have said old lady.
I'm going to use the word lovingly here. What a nut. She's just a nut. Just a nut. I mean, she was flying around Baja with her dad in the 40s and 50s, counting whales from the air.
Can you imagine what a romantic story that is? Like when she talked about flying in the small craft with her father, doing that, like, well, yeah, she's an adventurous person. I mean, she grew up with it. What to have a frontier land like that, just on the other side of the border, doing such adventurous things, landing on small strips like that.
Yeah, and with luminaries in their fields, like her dad and the rest of the folks at Scripps. They were amazing folks doing amazing things, flying into Baja. And I really need to land on a couple of guests who can talk about what it was like to fly into Baja in the 50s or the 60s or the 70s, because I think that's a lot of what Baja travel was in those days. Adventurous folks, doctors, flew down in their little planes, fished like maniacs, drank like maniacs, flew home. So that's a story for the future that I need to find. And certainly Francisco Munoz, when Pete Springer was telling me about, Munoz dropping a plane in on a road, and they've got to tip the plane to get it through a little cut and then push it off the road out of gas. I just need some Francisco Munoz stories of Baja Airlines.
Yeah. And it's funny, it is definitely a bygone era, and yet people are still making their own adventures down there. You had a husband-wife crew who are Instagram influencers. They do a lot of surfing and stuff like that. I mean, people are packing up their families and going down and still having real life, unbound adventures right next door. And
yeah, and it is right next door, and there's a pretty wide variety of vacations. Like, what's your thing? Are you there for the diving? Are you there for the surfing? Are you there for the overlanding? Are you there for the flora and the fauna and I mean, you can get away from nature. I mean, you can get away from population 2 minutes off of the main road. It's desolation on your doorstep, as I like to say. So pick your fancy, and it's there for you.
Yeah, and if adventure is not your fancy and you just want to get away to a nice beach, they have that in spades, as well as great places to dine. You've had a number of interviews with chefs and
Javier
hoteliers.
Placencia was a terrific one. To see a guy who's that, sorry for interrupting here, Christopher, to see a guy who's that comfortable in his skin, a dude who's just figured it out. He's doing his thing his way, has achieved some success with it, obviously, but couldn't have been nicer again to have a little podcast like me set up at his Finca Altozano. He was very gracious, and I find that that's really the defining character of people who love Baja, for sure, and the people of Baja. The graciousness is something that I keep coming back to.
Yeah, the culture of La Familia is very strong across the country down there, but it's not exclusive to the family. It doesn't take much to be welcomed into the embrace of these families by very caring and giving people who are proud, rightfully so, of what they've created and who they are, and always very eager to share. And it shows through with the people you've spoken with and how they've embraced you and shared. Thank you for sharing that with us. Tell me about why you insist on recording in what sounds like loading docks and I'm going to say jetway landing strips. What's a typical setup like for you when you arrive in town and say, I've got this interview. Where could I set up my microphones?
Let's just go back to Miguel Angel de la Cueva from the opening of the show. It's his birthday today. We're recording on Cinco de Mayo here at your home studio in beautiful sunny San Rafael, California, Christopher. And, I had been messaging Miguel back and forth. I was driving down the length of the peninsula and back up on the Baja XL in January and February of 2021. And I really wanted to meet Miguel because I'm a photographer, but he's an extraordinary, he's a Ansel Adams quality photographer working from La Paz, and he really does stunning work. So he agreed to meet me. I don't know, we probably rolled into town at 8:00 at night and needed food. And so he said, okay, come and meet me at this place. Open air, right on the street, on the Malecon. And I'm like, there's no way we're going to start recording at 10:00 at night. So we just popped out the gear. I mean, the political announcement cars are going by on the street. You hear the clanking of the glass. You can hear us drinking, people, walking up, taking orders, people talking. And I just said, you know what? Talking to the microphone, Christopher will sort it out. I'm doing like these prayers, like when people, Mexico's such a religious country. When you see people go by the cathedrals, they all cross themselves and kiss their thumbs, and it's just like I'm just doing that little motion right there, cross, cross, kiss, kiss. Christopher can sort this out. It'll just sound like you're sitting at the table with us. Hopefully I won't muff this whole thing, because that's I'm a technophobe, which is why I drive a 50-year-old analog machine without any screens at all. I just anything technologically.
Which reminds me, we should shovel some more coal into this recording machine of ours. We're gone.
So yeah, exactly. So I've recorded there. Some other places that have been difficult, I'm sure. Hopefully people feel like they're sitting right there with me. That's the point. This is an intimate medium, and I want people who are interested in this subject and in my show to feel like they know me and they're sitting there with me having a tequila or, having a beer and listening to the story just like I am. I'm doing this for me more than anything, guys. I hate to say it, folks. I'm feeding my own addiction here.
Well, it definitely shows through, and I do appreciate the sense of place as a listener. It's the technician me who's trying to make your podcast sound like it is produced in a big studio and not recorded in the cab of your pickup truck while drinking cans of beer out of paper sacks. But truthfully, I really do appreciate the sense of place. And
Have Mike's will travel, usually with a bottle of tequila these days. So thank you, Guillermo Salsa at Fortaleza. Appreciate the help.
It really shines through, and it does make it more interesting for all of us.
All right, enough with the flattery. Let's get on to the meat of this podcast, Christopher.
Which is what?
I don't know.
I thought we were in the meat. Talking about the you're really recording this because it's your sense of adventure and everything. You just finished the Baja 1000.
Baja XL.
XL, sorry, not to be conflated with the.
I just had to back out of the
trophy trucks.
Yeah, I just had to back out of the Nora 1000, which was a goal of mine. But I'm counting down to the Nora 500 in October, so I'm looking forward to that.
But you did the Baja XL, and you encountered a lot of adventures on the way, which you touched on the podcast that we released just 2-3 weeks ago, and you
Adventures
arrived
in drunk podcasting.
Exactly. Oh my gosh, how much had you guys had? I mean, clearly your brains were rattled and addled from the road, but
I think Dom still could have flown a 747 or whatever he flies commercially. He definitely was still. I mean, even though he's having a wine glass full of gin and tonic, perfectly proportioned as he said.
I cut that part out, actually. No, so it is. It must be really entertaining. I come from a production background. I make documentaries. I'm a photographer as well, and I know how difficult it is sometimes when you're all sitting down at the end of the day, and the last thing you want to do is pull out a device to start recording, and yet you manage to do it somehow. What is, again, that drive to speak to these interesting people? Is it strictly because you've got to get out a podcast every week, or is it because you're so enamored and excited about the people you're sitting with?
Well, the Baja XL was a sort of life-changing event. It's an event every 2 years. The organizer does the Budapest to Bamako rally, which is a crazy adventure rally from Hungary to West Africa. So let's just start there. And I think the point is to do it in a junky car as well, or at least it started out that way. So very intrepid travelers. And he became enamored with Baja and started this rally called the Baja XL, and it's 3,000 miles more or less in 10 days, mostly on dirt, and it's not for everybody. It's a skeleton of instructions, and you figure it out on your own. And there's a competition category for people who want to do it as fast as possible, and there's a touring category for people like me who are just glad to be there and don't need to rush through. But I did in 2019, and it was just, I hate to use the phrase life-changing, but that does percolate up. I had a vision previous to the start of the race to have Slow Baja painted on my soft doors of the Land Cruiser, just to kind of set the stage that I'm going to be with some real off-road racers and some folks who like to go fast in the dirt. And so I just wanted to sort of establish my expectations and let them know that I'm going to be slow. And if we're crossing paths, there's probably going to be a tequila Fortaleza in it for them. So there's reasons to wait around for Slow Baja to come by. But that 3,000 miles of dirt, seeing Baja that way, was really eye-opening for me, and I couldn't wait to do the 2021 event, January and February of 2021, 10 days. And of course, COVID came on. So as events were getting canceled left and right all over the world, the organizer figured out a way to do this event safely, thoughtfully, and did it. And I was delighted to have the opportunity and the excuse to go. But the event was not without some drama, and we heard from our friends in the off-road racing community that the event was illegal, and there was going to be police intervention and government intervention and all that. And we just figured, you know what? How about if we just don't put the event stickers on our truck, and our vehicle looks so different than any normal event proper vehicle, a Raptor or a Toyota Tacoma with 35s and rooftop tent and jerry cans all over. I mean, we're just totally different. We look different. We are different. We look like two grizzled old gringos looking for the next fishing, camping, cold beer. So we figured bringing up the rear in a vehicle like ours, we would be pretty much left alone, which we were. But, it was unnerving being in Bahia de Los Angeles having dinner after a very long day on the road, and a police officer walked right into the restaurant, right up to our table, confronted us about this rally that we were running, which we played dumb. Obviously, we weren't running the rally, but we were in the rally. And, he wanted us to step outside, which we wouldn't do. We stayed right in the restaurant, and it was very awkward, would be one way of putting it, unnerving. And then, when the police officer left and I looked around the restaurant, there were probably 6 tables occupied in the restaurant. And I saw my podcast guest for the next morning. I'm like, oh, there's Roger Mears sitting there. And I didn't know Roger. I'd been messaging his wife for a month or so about, hey, I'm coming down on this date. Is there any chance I could swing by the house and interview you about your life in Baja? But, we're not friends. I mean, I'm not, Joe Rogan rolling into town, making him famous. It's just little old me in Slow Baja. And here I am getting the police shaking me down at the table next to Roger and his wife. So it was just an awkward way, to walk over and then say, hey, hi, I'm going to be over at your house tomorrow at 9. Okay. So yeah, some of the adventures of podcasting, but that the Baja XL, for anybody who has a vehicle, it's kind of a rooftop tent crowd. People camp. There's a big camp every night, and it was a lot of fun. Ted and I chose to, if we can find hotel rooms in a shower, we have enough exposure driving in a completely open, primitive vehicle that after 10, 12, sometimes 16 hours in the vehicle a day, it's nice to get off the road. And I'm not ashamed to say I don't mind having a bed. We've got camp gear, so we do camp when necessary. But if there's a bed to be had, I'll take it. And
I just want to, before we get too far past this, I just want to point out that the spirit of the Baja XL is you're not going out there hooning, running down goat herds and such. You are out there to celebrate being on the road on Baja. Is that fair to say? It's not like a complete lawless cannonball run.
No, not at all. Not at all. It's all public thoroughways. So you're on the paved highway some portions, and then you're just on a lot of public dirt roads. So you're not hooning across people's private property, which does happen in other races where the organizers do need to get permission of those landowners and whatnot. But no, the Baja XL's all run on public runs. Yeah,
you live roads. On the edge, but you're not a total rebel.
I live on the edge, and just that I'm out in a bunch of dirt roads with nobody else on them anymore. So that's as edgy as I get.
All right, with that disclaimer, let's pay for your tacos and the gas in that old Land Cruiser and listen to some sponsors.
We can't wait to drive our old Land Cruiser down to Baja, and when we go with Baja Bound Insurance. Their website's fast and easy to use. Baja Bound Insurance, serving Mexico travelers since 1994.
Let's talk some more about the guests. What's the most sage or poetic thing you heard from one of your guests over the last couple of years? I'm sure there's been a lot, or the last year. I'm sure there's been a lot of stuff, and it might be a little bit of a blur. But what really stuck with you about what people had to say about Baja? Wow,
I'm stumped. I am stumped, Christopher.
I know we've been talking about motorsport.
Yeah, and that is a concern of mine, because I do enjoy the off-roading, the overland, the motorsports, but I really do want to bring all the other reasons that people go to Baja.
Okay, well, let's talk about the Burro adventures. What do you call it?
So we've got Trudy Angel saddling south, and we've got Edie Littlefield Sunbee, who walked the El Camino Real, and then you have Eve Ewing, who her dad said, hey, why don't you go to, why don't I fly you into Bahia de Los Angeles, and you can join this expedition, because everybody just left this expedition, and they need horseshoes, powdered eggs, and a bunch of other stuff that I'm flying down to them. And why don't I give you my daughter too? Yeah.
Wow. So has that inspired you to do anything in the future?
Yeah, for sure. So that's, Paul Ganster, again, he was down there with Harry Crosby, and these long, slow pack trips that must just be excruciating some days seem so romantic when you're talking about them. But the remote ranch life, I think, is not long-lived, and I think that's something that if I can get up there on a burro with either Trudy's assistance at saddling south or through another method, I'm going to slow my roll even more than the old Land Cruiser and do that.
Yeah, you talk about what a life-changing thing it was to do your first Baja road trip, and I can't even imagine that trip with the pack mule. It must almost be monastic, meditative, to be out there in the heat and the wide open distances, and everything is reduced to a very, very simple life of one foot in front of the other. Where's my water going to be? Where am I going to set camp for the night? And I love the idea of it. I don't have the courage yet to do it. Perhaps.
Yeah, you said monastic. I thought masochistic. So yeah, that's it's an M word somewhere. But a bottle of Fortaleza will help you get through the.
Fortalezas get their miles worth.
For sure, always. With a product that good, they don't need to pay more to have me promote it. I do want to come back to Pete Springer. Something he said that I do like. Luck beats good in Baja a lot. Luck beats good. I don't know if that'll be on a T-shirt one day, but I think that you do have to be lucky sometimes when you do dumb stuff down there that can involve alcohol or remote locations and breaking down.
But even when you're not doing dumb things, you get a lucky bounce, here and there, and that puts you in the right place at the fortunate time. Serendipity is beats planning for me.
Yeah.
That's a good one. You plan on getting back in the truck cab with Pete Springer and recording another one, don't you?
Pete has so many great stories that it's something that I feel anxiety. He's rolling up on 80 years old. I feel anxiety that somebody needs to pull these stories out of folks. The e-viewing must have 100 more amazing stories. Pete Springer just going down there when it was just, a simple thing, and it was cheap, and you did it, and you didn't think a lot about it. And then 50 or 60 years later, people look back and say, "Oh, you did that? That's crazy. That's crazy, mister. You didn't have GPS. You didn't have a sat phone. You didn't have a, fly you out if you get in trouble insurance policy. You just went down there and did it. You went on a motorcycle with no headlight, and you rode in the night until you crashed, and then you slept right where you crashed. Got up in the morning and figured it out." Yeah, so there's a different level of adventure that I think it's important to record that while it's still around, if possible, from the Malcolm Smiths to the unknowns like the Pete Springers.
Yeah, and we should all let that inform us in our own travels and our own fears that, we have so many safety nets right now in our pockets, in the sky, at home, that they're almost constricting, that we think that we can't do anything without all these safety devices around us, but really you can. And, don't take your advice from a couple, nerds like us recording in a studio, but you can go out there on adventure and you're going to be okay. You're going to find somebody. We've all, to quote Blanche Dubois, benefited from the kindness of strangers. And that's where the adventure usually begins. And don't be afraid of embracing that uncertainty and get out there and start the adventure like you've done again.
Yeah, I think that might be the recurring theme, if there is one, thoughtfully or unthoughtfully in my shows, that it always comes back to the kindness of the stranger, the kindness of the people of Baja. It is a place that 99 times out of 100 you're going to have a magnificent trip, and good things are going to happen. You're going to get great food and good adventures, and still it's a place where you can get a capital A adventure that you're not, I find that it's just harder to get a real adventure in life these days. And I think Baja, it's still pretty easy to get a capital A adventure. You can be off the road, out in the middle of nowhere. You can be, on the road, and that's a very adventurous road. The new Highway 5 is lovely, but the old Highway 1 it's a maximum concentration road. In my old vehicle, for sure, but in any vehicle, the potholes and there's no shoulders, and the way the road's crowned, and there's a lot of big rig traffic and livestock and jackrabbits running across. And so there's it's a capital A adventure to go down there, and does make you feel, I think, at the end of it all, a lot more alive. So, I'm an evangelist and I strongly recommend it, but I have a new guest coming up who just took an RV trip down with her family from Buffalo, New York, and had the time of her life after, a lot of people had told her, why would you ever go to Mexico? It's so dangerous and this and that. And she got on some forums and found other people saying other things, Canadians saying other things. Particularly, she took their advice, and a 3-week RV trip through the States, and a month of which was in Mexico, was absolutely life-changing for her and her kids and her husband, and her parents came along, and now they're shopping property in Baja for retirement. So it's that kind of a place.
I don't know if I want to go on or not.
We're going to leave it right there.
It sounds like a closer right there. But since I keep needling you and asking for any sage advice that's been passed along by any of your guests, you've spent a lot of time down there yourself. You've lived south of the border with your family. Leave us with one little piece that you would say. You've been giving it throughout this half hour we've been doing, but if I'm thinking of going down there, what do you say to me?
Well, so that's the thing. It used to be we would try to get through Tijuana as rapidly as possible on a drive. As soon as you're on the south side of Tijuana, you can stop at some, deposito and buy that case of beer and throw it on ice in your cooler and feel like, okay, the Baja trip has started. Tijuana, I think, is super exciting to me now. The food's great, lots of interesting stuff happening. Obviously, the Valle de Guadalupe has, 160 wineries and 120 small inns, or 120 wineries and 160 small inns. I mean, it's astonishing they still have dirt roads. Then you get to Ensenada, and Ensenada is, it's almost like an Italian village in that they've got the sea there, they've got the amazing seafood, the amazing climate around with the grapes and the fresh vegetables and chefs doing amazing things. And then, the cheese caves just south of Ensenada. And then, Bahia de Los Angeles, I haven't even scratched the surface there. I was there for, a couple of days. It looks really dry and dusty and sort of slow. And that makes me think like, okay, I just need to get out with Carol Mears and fish for tacos on her kayak with her, so there's so much for me that's still inspiring. We haven't even, gone more than a day's drive into the country. So San Catin's got great seafood and shellfish and things are happening. Then you get south, and, the whale watching trip that I took in San Ignacio with Sherry Bondi was just, it's hard to say life-changing too many times in this, but it's one of those things like, where the hell in the world do whales just swim up to your dinghy, say hello, give me a pat, hey, how are you? They're like puppy dogs, or like, it was just astonishing. Like, here are these massive wild creatures, and in one place in the world, they swim right up to your boat and you can touch them. Just bizarre, but amazing and powerful. And so, keep on going south. I love Loreto. It's a beautiful town. Stumbled into a baseball game up at San Javier at the at the cathedral up there at the Mission. And, the two baseball teams were having lunch. They were having a goat roast in between. And, my son's a professional baseball player now. He had his professional debut last night. So I've been watching kids baseball for 18 years. I've never seen two teams sharing a meal before the game together. And so that's, I think, Mexico to a T, that these adversaries, are going to go out there and play against each other and give it their all. But before the game, they're sitting down and having a goat roast. And it was just, and we were just, tourists in the town. So they welcomed us in to come in and have, there was plenty to go around. So grab a tortilla, gringo, and help yourself. And it was really, that's the spirit of Baja that I miss. And I think if there's a theme to my life and my show and being down there, it's, you don't need to plan everything. You don't need to have an itinerary. You need to have some pesos or some cash to buy gas, because you can't pay for gas with credit cards everywhere in Mexico now. Usually just in the northern and the southern ends, but in between you're going to pay in cash. And you need a map. I like Baja Almanac, and I'm looking forward to that benchmark new Baja Road and Recreation Atlas. And then you just need to go and have an open mind and an open spirit and see where the road leads you and what, say yes to things.
Why are we still sitting here?
I know, you got the great motorcycle right there. Let's go.
Let's go. Well, Michael, thanks again for bringing me on as editor of the Slow Baja podcast. It's always a pleasure. You always surprise me with the recordings you bring back from your adventures, even when they're just down the road. And let's hope for another exciting year with more safe travels. Well,
I can't wait to take you with me and have Baja seen through your eyes. That'll be a lot of fun.
My face is going to split in half from my big stupid smile right now.
Well, from Slow Baja, we're going to leave it right there. Thanks, Christopher.
Thanks, Michael.
Slow Baja's wardrobe is provided by Taylor Stitch. Responsibly built for the long haul, Taylor Stitch makes clothes that wear in, not out. Wherever your adventure takes you, Taylor Stitch has you covered. Check them out at taylorstitch.com. Hey, you guys know what to do. Please help us by subscribing, sharing, rating, all that stuff. And if you missed anything, you can find the links in the show notes at slowbaja.com. I'll be back before you know it. And if you want to receive notices on new episodes, please follow Slow Baja on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook for you old folks.